All right, you guys, let's start off with a change of plan that favors you guys for your test. So, student emails me last night. I'll say anonymous. It wasn't a bad email, but it was to point out a new detail on the calendar. So calendars can be updated, like UL may say this is tentative, and it's like one year they changed fall break. Fall break was originally supposed to be that, and they changed it. And so I have a photographic memory for certain things, even though I don't remember what I had for breakfast in the morning. I know for a fact that was not there when I did the schedule at the beginning of the semester. And I talked to Dr. Maya, and she's like, I have a printed copy, and it's not there. So this was something that UL added probably for people like me that are like, this is ridiculous. Like we basically waste a whole week and we're coming back from break. And so after speaking with Mayo, the fact that UL modified this allows us to take our last test on Wednesday. Because before it was a blank, you can't give exams between Wednesday and Friday. And you've heard me say this several times, like that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. But what can I do? I'm just very low on the totem pole. So that I think probably what happened is just communication. They probably some people like myself complained and said, well, really our only option is the Monday, and that's after break, and it's tough for everybody. So now that this is amended and I confirmed with Mayo, we're gonna have our last test on Wednesday, December 4th. It shouldn't affect anybody because our tests are usually on Wednesday anyway. And if anything, it just gives you more time. When we come back on Monday, we can have another review or last minute things. So, cool. And I'll send out an email reminding everybody.
Oh, they could do this thing yeah, that.
Thank you for bringing that up. Let me let me see if I can move that so that way you're not double dipping. That's a great point. And we might move the makeup day to the Thursday or the Friday. But again, like all this stuff has domino effects, so I'm open to input. So like if Friday would be better or Thursday would be better. The intent is still there though, early in the morning, so that students don't have another class conflict. But I'm totally okay with Thursday or Friday. Cool, awesome. Okay, so now that we got that out of the way, what do you guys want to? Okay, now that we almost have it out of the way. No, you're good. I want feedback. So do you mind repeating that question? I don't think I quite understood. But this is just regular class. It's not finals. Yeah. So your optional final is still on the schedule of the finals day. I don't like to quote it because I flipped it 310, guys, but I think it might be like on Thursdays. So this is just a regular class. But UL modified it to now I can give you a test. Whereas at the beginning of the semester, it was explicit. It was like no organized activities, no examinations. That's why we were going to do the makeups, because it was except for makeups. So yeah, 8:30. Yeah. Any other questions about like procedure, test stuff? All right. What about content? What kind of questions do y'all want to talk about? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so brachioradialis. Me, best way to look at brachioradialis is to acknowledge that it can be a pronator and it can be a supinator, but it can't do both at the same time. Like, so it depends on your radioulnar joint position. I taught it to you in quadrants. So from anatomical to semi-prone is quadrant 1. And from semi-prone to fully prone is quadrant 2. In quadrant 1, the brachioradialis is a pronation puller. In quadrant 2, the brachioradialis is a supination. Okay. We're going to get to some examples, but I want to refresh on how we got it. The process of the brachioradialis, to me, is no different. It's just one extra step. So for the past 2 exams, it's identify the agonist as a group based off of pull. And we know we're going to have some all-the-time pronators and some all-the-time supinators. Our all-the-time supinators, our supinator and our biceps brachii, our all-the-time pronators, our pronator teres and pronator quadratus. So you have these all-the-time pronators or supinators. And then you say, am I in a quadrant where when I need that group, my brachioradialis can help? So in other words, if I need pronators in quadrant 1, brachioradialis is like, I can help. But if I need supinators in quadrant 1, the brachioradialis is like, dude, I can't push you down. So I think, to me, breaking it down like that is a good step. If I need supinators in quadrant 2, brachioradialis is like, I'll volunteer as tribute. But if I need pronators in quadrant 2, the brachioradialis is like, I can't help you. So it's the same process. Identify the group. Who are the muscles in that group that are all the time? And then a second question is, am I in a quadrant at the brachioradialis? So for example, isometrically, if I just hold this position, gravity is trying to pronate me. I would need supinators to hold this position. I know I'm going to have all the time supinators, the supinator, biceps brachii. Is the brachioradialis a supinator in quadrant 2? Yes. So in this example, brachioradialis is like, dude, I could totally pull and help you maintain this position. Now, if I was pushing against my hand, now the external force is trying to supinate me. I need pronators. I'm going to have all the time pronators, pronator teres, pronator quadratus. The brachioradialis is like, dude, I can't be a pronator in quadrant 2. I can't push down. I can only pull up. So in this example, the brachioradialis wouldn't be part of that agonistic group because it can't be a pronator in quadrant 2. Is that making more sense? And then we could play that game on the other side. If I'm holding this position, gravity is trying to supinate me. I need pronators. I'm going to have all the time pronators, teres quadratus. Brachioradialis is like, I could be a pronator in quadrant 1. But if I need supinators in quadrant 1, brachioradialis is like, I'm out. I can only pull to midway. I can't push from midway. And so think about the different options. You would need supinators in quadrant 1, where you'd have to have an external force that's trying to pronate you. So I can have supinators working eccentrically, and I can have supinators working concentrically. But it's still supinators in quadrant 1, and it's still brachioradialis is like, I don't work like that. Do that. Same thing for here. If I need pronators in quadrant 2, I could have pronators working eccentric, pronators working concentric, pronators working eccentric, pronators working concentric. But the brachioradialis is like, I can't be a pronator in quadrant 2. I don't pull like this. So that's really all the scenarios. It's identifying the agonist for the radial ulnar joint, and then asking yourself, okay, am I in quadrant 1 or am I in quadrant 2? Based on the quadrant and based on the agonist, that helps you to determine if the brachioradialis can contribute. Is that a good review? Yay. So it's all about process. Identify, do what you know best, and that's identify the group. And then say, okay, brachioradialis, let's get to you. Are you in a quadrant? Knowing I need this group and knowing what quadrant I'm in, can you help me? I think one of the reviews, and Sarah's supposed to be helping me update all the lectures to make it easier for you guys to find things. So in other words, all of my lectures are just, 4:15, Unit 3, Wednesday, whatever. Sarah's supposed to go in and kind of say, in this lecture, you talked about the muscles of the elbow. This lecture, you talked about the muscles, to make it easier if you guys are reviewing or studying to help find certain things. Hopefully that'll help. So in class, I did this practice where I did a radial ulnar joint range of motion. I was like, fix the yoink. Brachioradialis. Now, of course, there's some all the time muscles, but I'm just highlighting the brachioradialis. Brachioradialis isometric. Brachioradialis concentric. Brachioradialis eccentric. Brachioradialis concentric. Brachioradialis eccentric. Supinator and biceps brachii concentric. Pronator quadratus and pronator teres eccentric. Because over here, I need supination force. Over here, I need pronation force. But the brachioradialis, because of the way it crosses, can be a pronation puller, and it can be a supination puller, just not at the same time. Depends on where you are. And these midway muscles, really where they come in handy is having an extra muscle for especially in ranges of motion, like being able to have a muscle that can help slow down or be the brake for supination and pronation, just like I taught you about the rectus, like being able to have the rectus help these muscles and help these muscles. At the end of the ranges of motion is where you run the most risk of having damage or getting hurt. So sometimes these midway muscles are there to add extra help in both ends of range of motion. It's like muscular insurance. This lecture is sponsored by your friends at Buc-ee's. Go to Buc-ee's and spend all your money on stuff. I can't lie, bro. I don't know if their secret ingredient in their stuff is like crack or what. But I went through 2 bags of Diva nuggets in one weekend, and I had no regrets. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So the thumb rule is something that I invented to help us see radial ulnar joint positions. So in 310, one of the emphasis in class is that we don't look at joints and joint motion globally. Like, in other words, we don't want to use supination is a soup hole with my palm facing the ceiling. We don't want to do that because I can have my palm facing the ceiling and be pronated because it has nothing to do with my palm and the ceiling. Global references lead us to make mistakes. If you're looking at a global reference and you say, I'm looking at the back wall, then if you you stay looking at the back wall, you may not realize that my neck is rotating. So global references are not good. Local references are great. Nose lined up with sternum is when my cervical vertebra is in anatomical position. Nose or chin looking at my right shoulder, I'm twisted to my right. So therefore, if I do this, hey, my nose and chin is looking at my right shoulder, so I have to be twisted to my right. Does that make sense? Local references work. So for the thumb rule, what we know is the wrist doesn't twist, right? I can't rotate my wrist in the transverse plane. This is radial ulnar joint motions. Radius is literally wrapping and unwrapping. So what that tells me is that when I'm in anatomical position, my thumb is lateral on my hand, and it's also lined up with my lateral part of my elbow. Lateral is lateral when I'm unwrapped in anatomical. But when I pronate, I take the lateral part of my hand or my thumb, and I flip it over to the medial side of my elbow. Does that make sense? So now a lateral part of my hand is on the inside medial part of my elbow. That's how I know that I'm pronating. That's the thumb rule. When the thumb is lateral, I have to be supinating. But when my thumb is medial, I have to be pronating. So it's a local reference that helps us to truly see what's happening when the room is trying to distract me from what's happening. I'll give you a good example that from 310. If I start here and I do this, 90% of 310 students will say, I didn't have any radial ulnar joint motion. And their logic is global. Well, I still see the palm of your hand. And what I try to show them is that does Superman fly prone or supine? Superman doesn't fly like this, right? Superman flies like this. So if I start here, this isn't how Superman flies. But if I bring my hands up over my head, Superman flies really good. So I had to have pronation because my thumb went from being lateral to being medial. We may not see it because it's happening gradually with my shoulder, but it had to happen. That's like saying if you went to sleep in a car and you took a nap and you were in Lafayette and you woke up in Lake Charles, that's like saying, I didn't travel west. You see that welcome to Lake Charles? You may not have felt it, you might have been sleeping, but it had to happen. So that's why we use local landmarks like the thumb rule, sternum to pubis, so that we can see how I'm deviated or rotated. Joint motion has to be locally referenced. So the thumb rule is to help us see whether or not my thumb is lateral, I'm supine, medial, I'm prone, or if your thumb is halfway lined up with your bicep, you're semi-prone. And the reason we call it semi-prone and not semi-supine is because the anatomical position is supine, so the only way to get to Lake Charles is to have pronation. So you're semi-prone. If anatomical position was here, we call this semi-supinate. Thumb rule. Remember 310, one of the fun thumb rule examples was the upright row, where as you row up, your radial ulnar joint supinates. Because if it didn't, you'd be here. You have to supinate to keep your fingers under the ball. So in other words, I start here, this is how Superman flies. But if I stayed prone, now I'd be hooking the bar with my thumb, because this is also how Superman flies. So as you pull it up, your radial ulnar joint is supinating in order to keep your grip under the bar. So using the thumb rule can help us because I can see how my thumb is medial, but then when I do this, my thumb is now lateral. Walk it down, thumb rule. Did that answer that question?
Yes.
You're welcome. Great question. And this is part of the art of teaching. You're not going to go into a book and find the thumb rule. You know why? Because I invented it as a teaching tool to try to help identify position and stuff. And that's okay. But I also think that's pretty cool that you guys are getting a experience that you can't just go out and find in stores, right? That makes you guys special, or at least I think so. Put it this way, some of you in graduate school are going to be teaching your peers about the thumb roll. Because they're like, I just don't get radio on a joint. You guys remember this one from 310? That's confusing as heck. So we use the thumb rule. Am I prone or supine? Where's my thumb? Thumb is medial. I have to be prone. Where's my thumb? My thumb is lateral. Have to be supine. But that's why we do it, because we don't want to use a global reference. But wait, wouldn't this be supine? The soup bowl is facing the ceiling. It's like, no, it doesn't have anything to do with the ceiling. So you know what some students are going to come away from this lecture? Campbell hates soup bowls. Maybe. But listen, it's no different than 310 why I didn't teach you flexion is fingers go forward. Flex it. Because I can pronate and have flexion where my fingers go back. Hands go up, legs go forward. Like that's not a good way to look at human motion, because it doesn't always have to look like that. Another example, extension of the cervical is when your eyes go up or you look up. Well, it's all fun and games until you have extension of your cervical and your eyes don't have to go anywhere. Like extension is moving further away from fetal, but you could also use landmarks. Chin is going to get further away from chest. Whether or not you do this or whether or not you do this, chin got further away from chest. Keeping it local helps to see all the time scenarios, not just sometimes scenarios, especially with those illusions. Lateral, ear, right shoulder. Like right lateral could be right ear gets closer to right shoulder, or right shoulder gets closer to right ear. It's the same change happens. So yeah, local references, local landmarks can help us to see those pesky illusionary joint motion position question. Anything else? Well, let's review what the test is on. So upper extremity muscles and functions, so like wrist, just check me on it, right? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Wrist, elbow, radial ulna, shoulder, and scapula. And also double check me, I should have remembered to put all the PowerPoints and all the PDFs and remember why, and again, I'm different. That's okay. It's okay to be different. But the reason I emphasize muscle is based off of their pull is because pull helps us to see why muscles are doing what they do. I wish if I ruled the world, or if I had like a magical genie, I'd be like, and the genie's like, 3 wishes, whatever you want. And I'm like, I want all muscles to be named based off of their pull. He's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, but all right. Just think about it, like we already have some that do. The supinator, pronator teres, pronator quadratus, flexor carpi ulnaris, adductor long. You have some that do. I wish they all had some type of pull
in their name, sternocleidomastoid doesn't exactly suggest pull. And I understand why they named it, origin, insertion. Some names are Latin, but my point is that it's not consistent. Some you got a Latin name, soleus, sartorius. So I try to bring it back to pull so that we can see what they do. Because again, if I just say, what does the sartorius do? Well, how does it pull? It's a flexion puller. It's a knee flexion puller. So bringing it back to pull helps us to apply things like agonist and retraction, stretching. The wrist should be really straightforward. Flexor and extensor carpi, ulnaris, radialis, digits, flexor digits, extensor digits. I think the only curveball at the wrist is palmaris longus, but even then it infers, right? Crossing the palm, flexion. Trying to think of the hardest ones. Radial ulnar joint, pretty good. Pronator this, pronator that, supinator, bicep brachii, brachialis, brachioradial. So I guess the hardest one would be shoulder, because it's a big class. And remember, I said that I'm never going to ask 3 functions. Now you still have to know the 3 functions because I could ask any 2 or 3, but for the way answer choices line up, like if I asked all 3, I'd have to give you like 12 different answer choices. So if the anterior fibers of the deltoid are flexors, abductors, and internal rotators, I might just say, which of the following are functions of the anterior fibers of the deltoid? Just pick 2. So I'm not disrespecting the third, it's just trying to not make all those answer choices, because they're already confusing. Abductors, so I would just pick 2 of 3. And another emphasis that I've said several times, but that's okay. That's how I learn. That's how I teach. The positives of the circles is that it gives you a 3-dimensional view when a photo will only give you 2 dimensions. So like any photo you have, whether it's an anterior view, lateral view, top view, it's not going to give you the whole story. Remember, like if the pec minor, I'm like, okay, you see how it pulls here, but it didn't give you the anterior pull because you have a 2-dimensional flat picture, right? So the circles are great because it summarizes everything in one view. And it also summarizes everything for not having to be redundant. So what I mean by that is if you do lists, which is great, again, I just want right answers. You'd have to be redundant. You'd have to put one muscle on several lists. And sometimes that muscle's working with this, and sometimes it's not, and that can be confusing. Versus one visual that has it all there one time. Any other question? Can the palmaris longus, I'm just randomly picking a muscle, can the palmaris longus be an agonist during wrist extension? Can it? Yeah, but only if it's working out eccentrically. Guys, that's really what this class is about, is trying to teach you how contractions work. Because I know you know the definitions of it. But like I've said with my softball players and you guys, like, just because someone memorizes the rule book doesn't mean they can play. And so that's what we try to do in here. We try to play so that you can become better practitioners of kinesiology. Make sense? I'm not reinventing the wheel. It's just this class is different because we play. I'm trying to teach you how to play. I'm trying to teach you how to apply knowledge. I know y'all can memorize. You've been doing it your whole life. I'm trying to teach you how to play. I'm trying to teach you and practice and develop the art of cooking without a cookbook. Y'all may be like this. I didn't have this gift, but my dad is the best cook in my family. That dude's never looked at a recipe in his life, but he can taste whatever he's cooking and be like, it needs. Because he's played a lot of cooking. He has that experience. And so it's going to be similar when you guys get into the workforce and athletic training and physician assistant, and every person that you're going to work with is going to have a different, it's going to be a different hand. You got to practice play. What y'all think? I know this class is shy. That's okay. What did y'all think, or does anybody care to share your thoughts on the scapula? Like, is it, do y'all feel, let me ask the question a different way. Do y'all feel comfortable with the scapula? Because it is a different view. Are y'all feeling comfortable with things literally pulling up, pulling down towards the spine, away from the spine and our spin? Is that okay? Just want to make sure. Anything else? Five words for you, team class. Get on up out of here. Get on up out of here. Yeah, have a good one, guys.